Our book launch. Hello.
Hello.
See some well-known
Hello, everyone.
there. Hi, Anya. Nice to see you
Come on
there.
in, come on in.
Fabulous.
Hello.
Lovely. Hello, Lillian. How nice to see you.
Yeah.
I had no idea you would be coming. That's really nice.
Good to see everyone. And you are taping this, right?
Yeah, it'll be on my YouTube channel as well.
Beautiful.
Hello.
You'll be on the YouTube channel now as well, Lillian.
Come on.
Yes, and I'll just say hello to all of my subscribers on YouTube. It's lovely to see you joining on this book launch. Great to see you there. So we're here with Claire Arnold-Baker, who is my co-author for the new book, and John Wilson of Online Events, who will do the introduction to the session, I think. But we're still waiting for people to join.
I just wanted to say hi to Simon. He's joining us from New Zealand. Hi,
Oh,
Simon.
I don't see him. Oh,
Lovely to see
great.
you.
Hello. And Emma Jartel, that's great.
Yeah.
Good to see all these well-known people. John Bennett, nice to see you there, John, up in Yorkshire.
Yes. Oh, it's great to
You know
be
John
with
Bennett,
everybody.
John Wilson. Do you know each other?
We do indeed, don't we,
Oh,
John?
good.
Yes,
Excellent.
we do indeed. And it's very confusing when we do stuff together. We've got two John Wilsons running an event.
I
It makes it
know,
nice and
that's annoying.
confusing.
Yeah.
So great to
Yeah. Valerie Landenberg, great to see you. Gloria Ruggieri. Oh, I've known you for a long time, Gloria, haven't I? A very long time. You were a regions person. Yeah.
And Diana. Hi, Diana.
Eva.
Nice to
Eva
see
Gross from my membership, from my inner circle. Lovely to see you. And Dida. Hi, Dida. Great stuff. Fantastic. That is so nice to bring all these people together.
Yeah.
Neil Todd. Hi, Neil.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. And Ho Law. Great.
I
Very
can see some of
nice.
the locations coming in the chat as
Yeah.
well. We've
Yeah,
got
you
Ryan in
take
from
us through the
Denver.
locations.
Oh, wonderful. Well, just as we're kind of settling in, if
Elizabeth
anybody would
from
like to let us
Sweden.
know.
Hi.
Yes, we've got Sweden as well. Fantastic.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Such
Let
an
us know where you're coming
international.
in from.
Susan Yakovu. Nice to see you, Susan. Another
Lots of our students as well. Wonderful to
Oh,
see you all.
lovely. That's great to see.
Yeah.
And
We've
Helen
got-
is here. Hi, Helen.
great to have you.
Yeah.
Amma from Cannes in France.
Very
Sheridan from Melbourne in
Oh, yes,
Australia. Adam
Sheridan.
in
Ruth
from
Millman.
Romania.
Hi, Ruth. Hi, Mark Boaz. Nice to see you guys. So
Oh,
many familiar people. Thank you so much for coming. It's
Thank
really a
you.
joy to have you all here with us. It's such a special moment. It's taken a long time to get here, Claire, hasn't it?
It really has. Our publisher, our editor at Routledge, has been incredibly patient with us because I think we must have gone over at least 3 deadlines. The book should have come out, I think, in 2020. So the fact that we're just doing it now in 2025, they have been incredibly patient with us. But hopefully it will be worth the wait. We've
Yeah,
put a huge amount
it
of
was
work.
definitely worth it for us because
Yes, it
it
was.
became obvious how important it was to get it right. And I think the thing that really slowed us down is when we decided that we did need to do our own little bit of structural existential analysis research specifically for the book itself. And so that took us back for, gosh, 9 months or nearly a year to do all that.
Yeah.
So we became like our own doctoral students, isn't it? We
Yeah.
had to go through the whole process that we put our doctoral students through. And it was quite humbling in many ways, but it was incredibly revealing about what we needed to say and what we needed to pay attention to. So I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, I think it was really important actually, because if we're trying to write a book about a methodology, we really need to show how that works. So actually going through that ourselves, going through ethics and and doing the interviews and then the analysis and really thinking, we had so many conversations about how, just really thinking about this methodology, what words we wanted to use, how, and really kind of grappling with some of these ideas that all went on behind the scenes, which took us, this is what took us the time, is that we were doing these, having all of these discussions before we even got to writing, because we needed to really make sure that we were developing the method.
And we were really developing the method further, because it had to be all there and it had to be completely explicit. And so we needed a lot of discussions to get on the same page with each other about it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we had lots of discussions around, who could use this method as well, and I think this is something that, we were talking about, how much of an existential background would you need to be able to use it? So
I think that was one of the big stumbling blocks, that with our doctoral students, we assumed that they would have been through all of that existential preparation. They would have done all the studying of Heidegger and Husserl and Sartre and all of that, and they would know what we were talking about. And so they would naturally know how to apply these things. But we had to kind of give people a minimal background. We couldn't expect everybody to have got that full background, because otherwise we would reduce the facility of using the method greatly. So that was a challenge too, and to formulate very clearly what other aspects of existing methods we were also using, like phenomenology and narrative input and hermeneutic input and heuristic input. All of those, we realized gradually, needed to be brought into the book, and we needed to spell out how each of those things would be used as part of structural existential analysis.
And I think also it gave us an opportunity to really root the approach in philosophy. So we went back to the philosophers to talk about knowledge and understanding and dialogue. So I think in some ways, I was thinking as we were writing it and I was reading, I was thinking, actually, this is a book about research, but it's also about existential therapy as well. And I think there's that real crossover, because we've written so much around how we can link some of these philosophical ideas into research, but it's also about this understanding of life, which is really what we're trying to do as existential therapists.
But we were forced, exactly right, but we were forced to be really systematic about it and to provide these structures. And I love the fact that the cover of our book has these natural structures of a tree, because that is what the challenge was, not to create some kind of scaffolding that would be harsh and that would completely go against the existential idea of not using technology, but being true to human existence in everything we do. So what we're trying to find was natural structures that are part of human existence to guide the structures that we put in place for a systematic analysis of what people experience. I think that's why the title is Structural Existential Analysis, and the subtitle, An Existential-Phenomenological Method for Researching Life, is slightly, oh, thank you, that's helpful, is slightly more soft. because that is really what it is about, Claire, isn't it? Researching life. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think what we were thinking about is really in terms of other methodologies, which, you know, a lot of them take a phenomenological perspective, is that we wanted to, it wasn't just looking at phenomenology, which is an important part of both research and therapy, but it didn't quite get to what we were finding in supervising research supervisees and doing our own research, is that you can only go so far. And I think certainly in terms of emotions, bringing in the emotional compass, suddenly that's a part that kind of almost comes up in other methodologies as an aside, as something that, you know, might just appear, rather than something that we really look at in detail and actually kind of direct our gaze towards. And the same for the other lenses that's part of the method. So suddenly we were trying to bring in things around paradox, for example, you know. So almost when we think about research, it's like, if we think about it from this objective way, then it's almost like we're trying to find one answer. Whereas actually human existence isn't one answer. It's, yes, the research is about one point in time, but it's also, we need to bring out that paradoxical aspect of human existence, that we can be one thing and another thing at the same time, and these can be completely opposite or contradictory. So again, I think when we were thinking about the method, and this expanding obviously on all of Emmy's work previously, was about how do we bring out this more existential elements of existence and trying to really understand these bits of human existence. And I guess, you know, a lot of it comes from our students doing this amazing pieces of research on human existence, you know, is experiences that are difficult and challenging, and how they are really trying to get to something around, you know, what is telling us about something about human existence.
So very true, Claire. This is why we dedicated the book to all those who seek to understand human existence better and who are committed to searching for truth and clarity. And what we're offering here is our idea of how you can use these lenses and filters to grasp in a systematic and in a structured way, to grasp the diversity, the complexity, and what I like to think of as the dimensionality of human existence. So that is why at the end of a structural existential analysis, you will find that you have a kind of descriptive answer to the question at many different layers, and how to handle those layers and bring them together is then a challenge you are left with. So to go through all those different layers is how we proceed. But I think the other aspect that we developed much further through our conversations and by reflecting on what we have learned from working for decades, really, with doctoral students, is that what matters so greatly, and where we work in such a different way than other research methods, even other phenomenologically based research methods, is that we have always used what we now call the ERD, Claire, isn't it? The existential research dialogue, which is that we get the information not in the usual way by sort of semi-structured interviews, but by in-depth dialogue. And that, I think, is the crucial difference, that we allow for that depth in the dialogue where we collect the data, the capta, as we sometimes called them, and that in that way it gets very wide, and then we filter all that wide information through these different filters that we'll say a bit more about in a moment. And that then gives us the filtered data that we can then start to draw some conclusions from.
And I think there's something around that dialogue that, as you say, Emmy, is different from other phenomenological interviewing, is that it's about that, really seeing it as something like a Socratic dialogue, that we're, that the researcher is not just looking at a list of predetermined questions, although you will want to have some kind of pointers about, what's going to help you to direct the conversation, but also to kind of go with the conversation, pretty much like how it is in therapy in some ways. You kind of go into your client's story and their experiences and trying to elicit more and more information, and then kind of having a sort of an oversight to make sure that you're looking at, what other directions you might want to investigate or what hasn't been said. And I think this can sometimes be a little bit daunting for novice researchers. And I think what we've realized over the years, supervising research supervisees, is that, IPA is really, helpful for people because they have these nice fixed steps, and they have these nice, sort of semi-such structured interviews. So there is something about having to have that confidence of a researcher to be able to go into these unstructured dialogical interviews, which are different. But I think, with existential psychotherapists, you've already got some of that training already.
Yeah, that is straightforward for them. Claire, how do you feel about me reading the first paragraph of the introduction and you reading, I think, the second and the third you were going to read?
Yes.
So I'll start us off. So this is the introduction to the book. Structural Existential Analysis, which will be known as SEA, is a qualitative research method that is particularly appropriate for the investigation of deeply personal ideas, feelings, and experiences. More than any other available research method, it focuses directly on the most intimate and most deeply personal aspects of a person's existence. It combines some aspects of narrative work, hermeneutic work, and phenomenological methodology, but it always keeps these in the background. The focus remains firmly on the human experience that is being made sense of, and the method always seeks to connect with what is most meaningful in people's experiences with the human condition. You take it from there.
So SEA is unique amongst qualitative research methods in having a focus on a very subjective, meaningful understanding of a person's experience. In this respect, it is perhaps most true to the original intentions of Husserl's phenomenological project, which was to bridge the gap between objectivity and subjectivity by making observations that are, as Kierkegaard would say, a form of subjective objectivity or objective subjectivity. SEA has developed as a clinical method over many decades and has the advantage of having been filtered meticulously by this clinical experience, so that it has become fine-tuned to the things that really matter to ordinary people who find themselves in a difficult situation.
And actually, looking at our audience, there are some people in our audience today who have been through this process. Anya is still just finishing her doctoral research. I didn't know you would be here today. Emma, did you do SEA as well? I am not sure. No, you didn't. But John Bennett is here, and he did SEA quite a long time ago now. John, when did you complete your research, your SEA research?
I think it was 2012. Might have been 2013. I'm not.
Yeah, so it's well over a decade ago anyway. 12 years at least ago. Yeah, so that's amazing. So you were one of the earlier doctoral students who actually got their doctorate using SEA. And you did it at a time when we didn't have all these, layers of method. We hadn't developed all that yet. In fact, your work helped us develop some of that. I am not sure, John, that you are aware that you are quoted in the book and that we have probably even one of his diagrams in the book, Claire, haven't we? No.
I think we wanted to, but it was so complicated that it didn't reproduce very well. So sadly, John, we weren't able to include
That is
the
what
diagram.
happened.
But it is a wonderful diagram. It's a wonderful diagram of the rows of emotional compasses.
Yeah, you were very creative about it. Yes, yes. And Anya, if I might bring you in, because I'm your supervisor or one of your supervisors, and you are just in the process of finishing your research using an SEA method, and you too, you have pushed forward with it, really inventing some of it, but you've also had the benefit of an early draft of the book, haven't you?
Correct. I was very lucky. But it's such an intuitive method, isn't it? So all the layers and all the lenses are of fantastic use when you do the research about the human experience. So to me, there's no other method like this one.
Yes. So tell us what your research is on. It's very, very existential, isn't it?
Yes, it's very existential. It's about the experience of witnessing death of a close person. So it's very, very existential. And yes, I use IPA, but then SEA helps me to look at the four worlds and the lens of time. So nothing like this one for my particular subject.
And the compass of emotions as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that. And all the best with your Viva and finishing that piece of work off. It's been fascinating working with you on that. So, yes, I think that has brought us to talking a bit more about the various layers of SEA, Claire. We should probably say something about that. And maybe, do we have time? Yeah, we do have quite a lot of time still. So maybe I'll read on page 3 and then you take it from there to give it a bit more depth, what we've done here. So when we work with SEA, we first learn to pay careful and meticulous attention to the being in the world of the people we work with. And what that means is that we look at people in context and in the way in which they are connected up to the world in lots of different ways. So we we open up to the person's situation, their context, and their assumptions, their ways of looking at the world, their way of being, and their way of making sense of the world. They are not just research participants, but partners in our quest for a systematic and structured investigation that is always pointed towards the heart of the matter, the experience of the human beings in question. R.D. Laing once remarked that psychotherapy is a form of research, as it is a search to get a better grasp of the way in which we have lived our lives. So he equated psychotherapy and psychological research as an emotional search for understanding and truth. He said, and I quote, "Psychotherapy must remain an obstinate attempt of two people to recover the wholeness of being human through the relationship between them." For him, the process of psychotherapy was an essential and vital form of human research, which could give unique access to new understanding, not just for the person examining their existence, but for humanity in general. For with every person who does that search, we discover something new, some new facet of what is going on. This process is about uncovering of what has remained unsaid, unseen, and unknown about life. And that is exactly what structural existential analysis is about. Getting a hold of what is unsaid, unseen, and unknown. Lang said, "The psychotherapeutic relationship is therefore a research, a search constantly reasserted and reconstituted for what we have all lost." For what we have all lost. So every time we do this work, we are researching how human beings can become more aware of what is at stake, more aware of how we view things, more aware of how we make mistakes, more aware about what is possible and desirable. Over to Claire.
When we research people's experiences carefully, we find that they live their lives in a multi-dimensional field of forces and tensions, both conjunctive and opposing ones. We also find that human beings invariably work hard at making sense of their experiences. And I think we can all, as therapists, existential therapists, we can all relate to that. You know, this is the foundation of the work that we do with people. They do so in many ways, not just by creating structures of meaning and making sense of things in the outside world, but also by paying attention to their inner resonance with what happens in their existence, both emotionally and intuitively. Therefore, we cannot just pay attention to how the person is situated in space at all levels, but we must also pay attention to how they come to the question they reflect on in terms of their historical and genetic progression, something like that. Furthermore, we must pay heed to their emotional state of mind and the quality of their connection to the world they are part of. In this respect, we shall not borrow from the practice of we shall not just borrow from the practice of existential therapists, but we shall also turn to some of the existential philosophers who have applied the heart.
So yes, it is a philosophical research, and it is always about what it is that truly matters to people and how specific experiences, like the experiences Anja was just talking about in her research, what is it like for a person to sit by the deathbed of somebody they know well and have loved for many years, what is that actually like? What does that do to a person? How does that change a person? How does that touch a person? What does this tell us about human beings? What can we learn from it? These are the kinds of bits of research that nobody has ever done in that depth, and therefore it deserves a method that can do justice to that depth, that doesn't flatten it, that doesn't make it into something that becomes structured and objectified, but that allows us to truly grasp the meaning of that experience. Because when we do that, we find out new things. We revive our understanding of human existence. So that is the objective of structural existential analysis. And of course, guys, this is a method that, though we've worked with it now for several decades, is a work in progress. And it will continue to be refined by all the people who will be doing that research and who will discover better ways and new ways of refining that. Claire, of course, is much more involved in that now than I am, because I only have a few doctoral students left. But I know Claire, for her sins, has many the whole time, and many of those are using SEA because, of course, you are now an SEA expert. So tell us a bit about that. How is that going?
Yeah, so I think it's been an interesting watching the development of SEA, I guess, over time. And I may well have been, I don't know, back in the late 90s, the first person to use SEA in my master's research. So there's something about, you know, using that that method. And I remember my second marker saying to me that that this wasn't very conventional for qualitative research, but I don't think that's put us off, has it, Emmy, in terms of being conventional. But certainly over the years, people tended to use the four worlds, which is the 4 dimensions that Emmy had developed as the framework for existential therapy, as an additional element to research. And so what we found was that a lot of students would be using something like IPA or Van Manen's hermeneutic phenomenology, and they would be getting their themes using that particular method. But then they felt, well, actually, there's something missing. And so they were using those 4 dimensions, those 4 elements of space, you know, the physical, the personal, social, and spiritual dimensions, to add an extra layer onto the research. And then really what we started to think about is, well, this is actually a methodology in its own right. It's not this additional bit that we then add as something that we're over, applying over the top of the thematic part. This is actually something that we can use in its own right. And what we've seen then, certainly at the New School, is a real move towards just using SEA in its own right, rather than as a blending methodology with other methodologies. And I was just looking at a few sort of how different people have blended it. So we've had lots of people who blend it with the heuristic methodology, with narrative, with Van Manen, IPA, and I think John yours was also fractions of the life world as well, wasn't it? But we've also got people who have used it purely in its own right. And I think one of the first people to go through who passed her Viva with no corrections was Elizabeth Fagan. We've quoted her in our book as well. So she was the first person to use the method and combined the 4 dimensions with the 4 temporal or the dialectics of time, as we call it in the distinctive features book, and use that as a kind of a matrix to look at the experience of Orthodox Jewish men who came out in that situation. So really, again, I think the beauty of the method is that it also allows for trying to capture something of process as well. So as I said earlier, you know, it's not just that we're investigating one experience in time, although sometimes we do. There's also something about trying to capture this process. You know, things change. You know, we have an experience, we have a before the experience, then we have the experience, and then we have after the experience. And then sometimes, you know, we might think about even further into the future or into, you know, eternity. So there's something about trying to, using the method to also trying to capture that kind of process. And as existential psychotherapists, we love process. That's something that we really like to involve ourselves with. So I think the method also kind of enables us to be able to do that as well. And I think the kind of going on to what Emmy was saying about being creative is that there's a lot of creativity. You know, we're not saying that you have to use all of these particular heuristics or lenses. That really is about trying to engage with the dialogue of your participants' experience, and then thinking about how you're going to be looking at that and trying to bring out some of that understanding in different ways. And so for some people, they might want to just use a couple of the lenses to bring out certain elements of that. Some people might want to do the full analysis using all 5 of the lenses. There's no prescriptive way. And it's also not, although there's a structure, we're not trying to force data into different things. They're more like, and I love Emma's ideas of a prism. You know, it's like we have a prism and we're shining light into the different sides of the prism. This is what the lenses are. It's not we're forcing something into a predetermined structure. It's rather than, if we look at it in this way, what does that show us? If we look at it in this way, what does that show us? And how then do we kind of get to something that may be at the center?
And that is the idea, isn't it? That in phenomenology, we learn that to really understand something, you have to come at it from many different angles. And it is only if you go round the houses like that and you describe what you see from all those different directions, even from above and from below and from inside, if possible, that's when you begin to grasp what is really there. So that is very much part of what we aim to achieve. I was thinking, Susan Yakovu, are you still here? Because you and I are co-supervisors of a student at the moment, aren't we? You've done a lot of SEA supervision as well. I wondered if you wanted to say something about your experience. I can't remember whether you used it in your own research as well. Is Susan here? No, maybe not. She was there a moment ago. No.
Just having a look, but I'm not seeing Susan in the room right now.
Okay.
So I'll
I
keep
think
my eye
Susan-
out for Susan coming back in.
Susan did use a blend between IPA and SEA. She used the 4 dimensions in her research.
Yeah. I think for a long time that was a compromise that the universities that validated our courses were happy with. So, well, when I worked with regions, the validating university was City University. And in the beginning at the new school, it was the University of Sheffield. And now for a long time, it has been Middlesex University. And all 3 of those universities, of course, had their objections at various points. And it was like, oh, you can't just use a new research method. You know, you got to stick with what is accepted. And so what they would accept is to add a little bit of SEA on top of something else. So very gradually, by doing that and having these combined kind of multi-method kind of projects and SCA developing in its own right, we have gotten to a point where nobody ever questions it in that way. Most people now, this has been going for 30, 40 years now, most people have heard about structural existential analysis, and they will welcome a student having done a project like that. So that is a great relief, isn't it, Claire? That we don't have to be on the back foot about it anymore. It is like, okay, it has been seen and it has been approved, as it were, by the research community. Well, part of it. I mean, I'm sure we're going to encounter some very interesting criticisms in reviews and all sorts of places about the method, but hopefully that will be a constructive dialogue that will help us developing and improving SCA rather than it just being dismissive.
Absolutely. I think this is it, is that we just need to, things become creatively developed. I think somebody was saying to me, a student was asking me the other day whether they could use, found poems, because there's quite an interest at the NSPC at the moment about this idea of found poetry, creating poems out of the research.
Yeah.
And I think absolutely, we're finding it's about finding creative ways of presenting these experiences. And I guess in some ways this is, we're very aligned with Van Manen's work, where he was saying that actually it's almost that research is the art of writing, because we have all of this experience, and then somehow through this hermeneutic understanding that happens, we need to then create something that we can then transfer that knowledge out into the world, that other people can grasp what it is that's kind of at the essence of the experience. So I think, again, this is another way in which we can do that, isn't it? It's like we're using these different lenses as a way of organizing or presenting an experience in different ways so that people can grasp something about the importance of that experience, or the challenge of that experience.
Yes, absolutely. We should probably just mention what the lenses are, because, we are taking it for granted, but people won't know. So it is time and space, and then the 3 Ps, which are passion, paradox, and purpose. So each of those lenses have their own subsets. So for instance, the filter of space uses the 4 dimensions of the world, but you can apply the polarities to that as well, so that you end up with even more layers of understanding. The one about passion is about the emotional compass, which has a way of looking at where each emotional experience fits in relation to somebody's values, what it is they're aiming for and what it is they're afraid of losing. So that connects up as well with the filter of purpose, which looks at people's values and their objectives and their projects in life. So each of the filters opens up a whole array of other layers, as it were, that you can choose to go more or less deeply into. I think we're getting a lot of questions, Claire. So, John, do you think it would be good to maybe go to some of the questions at this point? And that may bring us to talk a bit more about some of the things in the book.
Sounds like a good plan. We could do that. And I've also got my eye on the chat in the live stream on your YouTube channel,
Oh,
Emmy,
really?
which is
Oh,
also
wow.
very exciting.
oh,
So
right.
Oh, I'm not
Uh,
seeing that, guys. So I'll catch up with that later, but that's great. So there are quite a few people on YouTube watching too.
well, and if anybody who's watching on the YouTube stream has a question, please get it in the chat. I will be able
Yeah,
to see it and I'll be able to put it to Emmy
absolutely.
and
Be
Claire.
part
So,
of it.
yes.
Step into it.
So a special welcome to all your subscribers, Emmy, on the YouTube channel as well, which is exciting. I can see a question there in the chat. So here in Zoom, would SEA be appropriate to use solely for autoethnographic research?
Well, it's more about combining it, I suppose, with autoethnographic research. And yes, it has been done. That is a very easy combination to make, really, because both are very sort of sensitive methods that look very carefully at people's experiences. So absolutely, that is one of the, I'm sure we mention it somewhere in the book, and that's definitely one of the things that we would recommend. And we always recommend mixed methods in our qualitative approach. We love people using IPA alongside SEA or Van Manen's method alongside SEA. All of those things are going in the same direction. We're not in competition with each other. We're all trying to grasp what is important in terms of quality in human existence, rather than research getting stuck at the surface or getting stuck with things that are objective or kind of managed in a way that becomes very technical and alienating. It is about getting deeper and closer into it.
We have had a student recently who combined those two methodologies. So again, I think thinking about these SEA and the heuristics and the lenses and filters, we use those words interchangeably in the book. But basically they're just, again, another way of looking at the data. And that's the task of research. You know, we have these interviews and you end up with 15 pages of dialogue, and then you think, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to turn all of this long interview, hour-long interview, into something meaningful? And so this is the job, isn't it, that we have to do as researchers. We've got to think about how do we turn that into something meaningful. And so we can do it in lots of different ways. And I guess this is the thing about SEA, is that we've offered some lenses, some filters that we can apply to all of this data that we've got, to try and help us to draw out meaningful elements.
Yes.
And so they can easily be
Absolutely
adapted and blended with other methodologies.
And I think we need to keep remembering what you said earlier, Claire, that although SEA has started from psychotherapeutic practice, you know, being more systematic in our existential practice, that is what's taught us SEA. Now that it has become a research method, what we're learning in the research comes right back into psychotherapeutic practice, showing us different pathways for exploration and different ways of keeping track. I find it a very helpful instrument in my clinical supervision with the students I supervise in our low-cost clinic, and Anya used to be one of them, where our doctoral students, as part of their clinical placements, come to work at Dilemma Consultancy, and they see clients at low cost, and then I supervise them once a week to help them refine their existential skills. And without them knowing it, when I listen to what they tell me about their clients, I'm always applying these filters, and I am thinking, is this person really seeing how this person is integrating past experience, or how much or how little they are present in the moment. Is this person really working with taking what they learned from the past into the present and into the future? Are they aware of that whole array of possible ways in which they can make choices about their future? What are the options open to them? How can we help them unfold these? So that's an example of the sort of thinking that comes back into our clinical practice from this research. I see.
Thank you both for those responses. I'm seeing some more questions coming into the chat. Are you all right if I read a few more?
Because it's hard for us to read the chat while we're chatting.
Yes, absolutely. So I've got one here. I'm interested in the overlap/distinction between interview and therapy. Seeing as SEA involves such open-ended dialogue compared to other research methods, sorry, not messages, research methods, and is used for exploring emotional depth and meaning, do you find the boundaries between therapeutic exchange and research sometimes blur in practice? And there was another allied question, I think.
Very good question, that. A very sharp question. Shall we take that first?
Let's take that. Well,
Claire, do you want to say something?
A colleague also asking whether SEA has a value for practice in regular therapy also.
Yes.
So I wonder if those kind of two questions go together. And
those belong together. You're quite right. And both the answers to both those questions is a resounding yes. Absolutely. These people obviously get it, and they understand how closely related research is to doing psychotherapy if you allow yourself to do your research in this very in-depth, precise, attentive, resonant, careful way. And yes, of course, when students interview people, it becomes often very close to therapy, because people, well, think about Anja's work, talking with people who have lost people and who are now reflecting on how this experience of sitting with the dying person has changed them and has affected them. When she interviews them, that may be the very first time they really allow themselves to speak about this, to say the unspeakable, and to reflect on it without judgment. So that is very close to therapy. But Anja, where would you draw the line? How would you know when to take it back to a research interview and not get lost in the deep exploration of therapy? You knew it every single time, didn't you? It never was a problem. But how did you know that?
I think it was just about the applying of this existential way of talking with participants. That would not be entirely possible with IPA purely. That's why that was such a perfect method for me. And obviously, like being a therapist and working existentially, we kind of have these skills. We know how to talk in a way that is like, yes, not intimidating and really, really inviting.
Yes, but also you knew where to draw the line. So how do you draw that line differently in a therapy session where you know you're going to see them again next week and the week after? And this one, which is a one-off session, a very in-depth but one-off session. That in itself, to me, is the line. It is a timeline. We only have this time. But how do you apply the limit? How do you stop when it's gotten very intense?
And that's so subtle. It's difficult to say how to draw this line, obviously, but I think by using SEA, you kind of know how to do this.
Yes.
Because you already know what the filters are, you know what you're looking for. But then still as a researcher, you know that you are not a therapist in the conversation. So it's about this very delicate balance between talking in a therapeutic way, but in the same time being a researcher and purely researcher.
Yes, which is to simply record what the person's experiences are, rather than having the task and the project together with them of resolving any problems or, drawing conclusions from it all. Although some conclusions are drawn even in the SEA interview, they are not those long-term workings through of thinking, but what is it that made me experience it like this? And how does that affect me in my life? And how might I be able to do that differently? That part doesn't happen.
100%. And as you, Emmy, saying, this was the conversation that people never had. They've never been asked what it is like to see someone's death, and they did not sometimes realize what a shift they were experiencing. So it's not only about the loss, it's about existential shift.
This is a very good way of putting it. And I think that is always true with SEA, no matter what you investigate. It's always about getting a hold of how these deep life experiences change you and how that transformation happens at all the different layers of your existence, and to think that through, to clarify that for yourself, and to kind of harvest it for yourself. It is a kind of harvesting of experience, I always think. I think of it a lot as I think of, oh, maybe it is not in the book this, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. I think of it a lot like winemaking. It's like people have cultivated their grapes, the grapes of life. And in the interview, they're collecting the grapes and then we putting them through the refinement of the filters. And in that process, we distill the most essential, meaningful elements of their learning. Not just for them, but for everyone. There is learning in that for all of us, which of course in therapy is not the case. It's only for that person. But in the research, you do it with many people in order to come up with something that can be so filtered that it becomes available for everyone to understand more about what it means to be human in all those different ways.
I was just going to say as well, in terms of that difference between research and therapy, is about the attitude that we take as the researcher or as the therapist. And I think, and maybe we'll come on to this in another question, but that the SOAR, which is the acronym for state of mind, is so important for SEA research, because when we're using ourselves as the researcher, in the same way that we use ourselves as therapists as well, we have to be really aware of our own positionality, and we have to be really aware of how we are approaching our discussions. And so when we're talking with our participants, yes, we may feel that there is, we may be kind of bordering into, therapeutic territory, but we're also thinking that actually we're researchers. We're listening to our participants' words with a different ear in some ways. We're listening to try and help them understand their experience, or to try and broaden out that experience, not to kind of, as Emmy said, to resolve things, but also to try and to get that deeper understanding and to get something of that knowledge. Sometimes I say to my research supervisees, when you're doing your interviews and you're thinking about what they're saying, then think, if I was going to write, have I captured a good quote? Have they given me a good quote in that I could use in my research? Because I think sometimes you might just, somebody will say something to you and you'll think, oh, that was interesting. But you haven't really kind of gone into it any deeper. Or you might look at a transcript later and think, oh, I wish I had just asked them to elaborate a little bit more on that. Or
Absolutely.
I wish I had I realized that they changed track halfway through the sentence, and I hadn't got the rest of that bit that they were capturing. So there's something about, as the researcher in the dialogue, is to try and keep track of that, try to keep track of, making sure that they're really explaining things, to go back again, and probably you wouldn't do that in a therapy session, because you would just kind of pick up what they are saying, and and what they're saying, you just carry that along with you. But when you come to research, we really need that kind of drawing that out in a more concrete kind of way. And I think paying attention to our own part in that process is hugely important, because that's where we stop ourselves introducing bias, and there's the whole big bit in the book about that as well.
I can see, Claire, that there are new books to be written about it, because as we speak, we are already going in new directions again. So there's going to be so much literature that's going to be generated about all this. And I see Neil Todd saying something about how he has used Brown and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis alongside SEA. Could you say something about that, Neil, if you're still here? That sounds interesting. I didn't know you were doing that or had done that, because you finished, haven't you?
No, I've not. Hello, I'm not finished. No, I'm still continuing, and so there was a lot of, in terms of the verbatim stuff, there was a lot of to cover, I suppose. So I thought perhaps breaking it into a thematic process, and I looked at various ways of doing that, and Braun and Clark seem very, it's a very detailed and long process, but what it does give you is a very clear reflexive view of the client, if you like, the participant. And then what I really found all the way through this process, right from, the very early stages of planning, is that SEA is working all the time, especially, I suppose, the phenomenological reductions. It's working all the time in the background. It's like humming away in the background all the time, which is why I found it very similar to my therapeutic client work.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what I wanted to blend. I can't see the point of doing a doctorate and spending all this time and effort if it's not really going to be, if it's just a piece of paper at the end that's no one's going to read. I wanted to really combine this whole process together. So that's where SEA really came into the being for me. It's interesting to see that I'm in the process of still writing, but now there's a more concrete form of SEA available.
Yes.
But it's interesting.
There might still be time for you to use some of that then in your analysis.
I've already
You got the book. Great.
But in a way, it's very interesting, because what's already out there is also covered in your book by the looks of things. I haven't got your book, but it's also covered in there. But the thematic work really condensed into a manageable form. And I'm looking at sports people. I'm looking at people who are moving from having lived in quite a narrow environment, narrow world, into retirement, transition in the mid-30s. So there's a lot of life still to be led, and it's pretty traumatic. It's specifically looking at rugby players. And there's a lot out there in terms of research that shows this is not a happy time.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much for telling us about that. I see Dida said something. Are you still there, Dida? I thought that was very much in line with what Neil's just been saying about still using, maybe Dida's gone.
It is here, yeah.
Still there.
Sorry, I accidentally sent that message to Dida in the first place. So
Okay, well, it's very appropriate to have Dida on next then. You said that that link between doing therapy and your own life continues to be there, even at your mature time as a therapist.
Actually, Emmy and everyone, it's probably to do with my mature time as a person, because I've never been the kind of person that looks back. I tend to just, I'm now. I don't plan. I just, whatever, oh, right, I'll do that. And my whole life has been like that. So, but now, what did you call me? A mature time in my life or something, or mature. In other words, 80 years old. Let's just.
Yay.
Anyway.
And still working as a therapist.
But what I find really fascinating is to look back and not interpret, but to see what my choices have been and what they were about, because I did so much. I made so many different choices and things I did. And how I approached, without being conscious of it, it wasn't a thing, life, yeah. And then I thought, this is so interesting, because it's so similar to how I am as a therapist and a supervisor.
Of course.
Caught up. So this whole thing, of course I'm changing, we all change, but there's something that goes, I can't help it. It's like we can't change our signature. You know what I mean? You're just stuck like that. And I'm compelled.
It's like your fingerprint, isn't it? You can't change it.
And so I'm compelled to have that same attitude. And it's not anything to, okay, it's not that exciting and interesting. But to me, and I've never thought of looking back at my behavior, basically, and what that meant and what, and how it's still up and running, I suppose. To me,
how you've expressed who you are in your life, in the living.
All the time, I can't help it. So everything is personal. I think you're personal.
Yes. So think what a wonderful research project we could do about that.
Yeah, I've never, by the way, I'm a bit of a phony here, because I've never embarked on any kind of official research to do with MAs or things like that. But this, to me, is really interesting. Yeah.
Cool. We'll send you a copy of the book soon. John, do we have any other questions we should be addressing?
We do have a couple more. And I think there was a last point from Neil as well in the chat. Neil, I don't know if you want to unmute and just make that last point, and then we'll go to some more questions.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that is what SEA contributes to people it. Yeah.
Seems to be about people, and that's the whole process of my work, really. I find myself interested in individuals rather than people, but it does allow you to have an eye about people in what is a theoretical, if you like, piece of work. So,
yeah, exactly. And not just people from the outside, but people from the inside.
Exactly.
As they experience something, as they compute something for themselves, as they make sense of their world, and they kind of add, therefore, by them using their brain and their experience and filtering it through their own life, they add something in a very human way to whatever we're researching. And that is what SEA aims to capture. And as I keep saying, of course, we will get better and better at capturing these things as we refine the method, won't we, Claire?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think this is it. Every time we have a new person, new research supervisee doing SEA work, something gets sort of enlightened, something gets revealed. It's a bit like Heidegger's idea of the clearing. We suddenly, something kind of comes out, or a spotlight goes onto it. And I think it's that, because we're not finished processes ourselves, we're not finished people. And so we can't possibly have a method that is the method, because it's going to be different, because we're different and our participants
never finished. It's a process and it's never finished. And as long as we remember that, and so it is with research. The research project finishes, but that research is not finished yet in many ways. Yeah.
Thank you both. Picking up, well, a question around abbreviations, maybe as we're settling into some of the language, and a colleague wondering what IPA is an abbreviation for. So I'm sure that's a question
talk
that's
about
shared.
IPA.
Yes. What's
Well,
IPA?
It's interpretive phenomenological analysis. So that's abbreviated to IPA, and that is Smith, Flowers, and Larkin who have come up with that methodology.
Yes.
So it's quite popular in psychology and psychotherapy.
Very, yes.
Qualitative research. So yeah, apologies to all these people throwing out these abbreviations. We sometimes forget that not everyone knows what they are, and I always find it really annoying actually when I read things with abbreviations and I don't necessarily know what they are. So many apologies to those people.
Let's try to steer clear of making comparisons between methods and getting stuck in the technology with so many people watching us that don't really have that background necessarily. John, are there any questions from the YouTube channel that we should be taking, you think?
I'm not seeing any over there just now. Lots of appreciation for the book, which is great.
Oh, that's nice.
We've also got a viewer just saying, I've just purchased my copy of the book, so that's great as well. And so that's lovely. And we'll be popping the link back into both chats as well. And well, while I'm talking about purchasing the book, there is that special discount that's available just now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we don't want to miss that. And maybe, Jeff, it's a good time to pop that back in the chat so that we don't miss the discount.
So that is if you buy it directly via the publishers, which is Routledge, and there is, there Jeff has already put it in. So if you buy it on Routledge, you can get 20% discount with that code. Is that only for today, or is that?
I think it's no idea. I think it's for a month or so. And also just for those students at NSPC, we're going to be buying in some discounted rates books so that you can buy from NSPC. I think it's probably going to be in a week to maybe 2 weeks.
Very good, very good. So you're going to use your author's discount, are you, to buy?
Yeah, so it might be slightly cheaper than the 20%.
Thank you for doing that, Claire. I'm sure the students will be very appreciative of that.
So if you're a student, pause on the purchase right now. And if you're thinking about enrolling as a student, well, that's great. It's a great reason to join the program.
Oh yeah, put the website of NSPC in there. I think.
Yeah, we'll do that too. Is it going to be available on Kindle? Is another question. Yes, it is. We've got the Amazon link.
Really? Oh, well done. I didn't even know that.
Yes, it's on Kindle.
That's good. That's good.
Grab. There's the NSPC link. We'll get the Amazon link in there too. Oh, Francis has got it already.
Thank you, Francis. Do it. Well done, Francis. Thank you.
Great. A couple of more questions. If you're up for that.
We are. We got another 10 minutes or so.
We do indeed, yes. There was another abbreviation in the chat, but with an explanation. So a colleague who's using PAR, Participant Action Research, for PhD research into medical trauma, And it sounds like SEA would work well with
Yeah,
PAR.
definitely.
And yeah.
Definitely. Well, Claire and I are both very much in favor of collaborations and multimodal qualitative research, and we have designed SEA in such a way that it can be an add-on to other forms of qualitative research. And indeed, it could be combined with quantitative research. You know, I think there's a real future in that. If you're going to find out, working with 2,000 people, what their view of death is, but then you do some SEA with maybe 10 or 20 of them, you will get a much more in-depth grasp of what you are investigating than if you just do the quantitative work. So all those combined forms of research, I think, should be the future always, because that's how we learn. If we bring the objective and the subjective more together, that's when we get the full picture of how things stand and how things are experienced by people.
We've got a couple of comments that are not a question, but I think create something really interesting around, well, let me read this one. Mind blown, exclamation marks. I think that's a moment of appreciation already.
Oh, that's lovely. That's a lovely comment. We were a bit worried that it would be seen as rather boring as a topic and that nobody would be interested. So mind-blowing is wonderful. Thank you very much.
I think we're in the opposite of boring, aren't we? We're just, yeah. Well, and this colleague is saying that they're managing a suicidal or a suicide counseling service. Give me a perspective on that.
Yeah.
Sounds too, so like research agency and aid work that could be powerful.
I think, John, if I can just chime in for a minute, quick
Oh,
second.
Marcy, hi.
Yes,
Yes, please.
hi.
Thank you. Oh, great.
That was my comment, and Claire's my supervisor.
Fantastic.
I've been in practice for about a year and a half now, managing a suicidal and bereaved by suicide service. And we have very complex clients, and we have to we have to assess risk. And we get bogged down by trying to figure out risk. And we're losing the person.
Yeah.
Because I'm just looking at diagnoses, BPD, you know, so this is really like, I came here about my research. I didn't come here about my job today, but it's really given me a different perspective on how can we use this?
Yeah.
So I encourage you to have another workshop and about helping people find the meaning in life. And because my job is about instilling hope so people do not end their lives now.
Absolutely.
So my research is about death, but now my job is about trying to keep people alive.
Yes.
And how
but you can only instill hope if you engage with the essence of what is wrong for the person.
And the paradox.
Do not connect to that. You
So
can't
I would love to help provide input if you just consider how can we, especially in this time, we are so overwhelmed with the number of people who are suicidal.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'll just leave that with you and Claire.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, because, you know, this is running on my YouTube channel, and on my YouTube channel, I'm constantly confronted with people in the deepest despair. And, you know, a lot of young people. It's actually a lot of people between the ages of 18 and 45 who watch my YouTube channel. And they so often feel totally lost. They haven't got access to psychotherapy. They just do not understand why life is going the way it is or how to make sense of it. And to listen to them and to see what really troubles them and what it is that stop them to put things in perspective for themselves, or to have hope, or to have a feeling that life is a process that you get better at, and where you will find a path to get closer to the things that are of real importance to you. That is what is missing, isn't it? And you're so right. If you use an SEA way to probe that and to get to the bottom of it, you stand a much better chance of truly connected with the person who is in distress. So that you can actually address that head on, and you can help them explore that and discover a new way of looking at that.
Can I also just jump in here, because we're going to be doing a conference on this whole topic in the 1st of November, I think, with online events and the Existential Academy. We're just putting this all together at the moment, and the title is Dying to Live or Living to Die, an Existential Paradox. So we're completely jumping into this whole topic. So do keep eyes and ears out. It will be, did I say, a joint event with online events? So yeah, we will be kind of really looking at this, because I think it's so important about
Thanks for remembering the conference, Claire. It's such a great
yeah,
title.
impressive.
Yes. Yeah, we're absolutely in those themes. Yeah, I can see some lovely feedback coming in. Thank you for a great seminar. So much food for thought and inspiration, really valuable for my MA research. Another one there, a great work for mankind. Thanks to all. Yeah, wonderful. Oh, that's great. What a great toolbox, and congratulations. So, yeah,
nice,
fantastic.
I also just wanted to say that we've got lots of diagrams in the book, and also I think both Emmy and I have gone about the analysis in very different ways, and I guess there's also something to show you there that there's no one way, there's no prescriptive way in which to do and present it. So I think so hopefully all the diagrams, the different ways that we have demonstrated the analysis, will help you to see how you can use it in your own individual way.
It is a research method that allows for a bit of freedom, which is precisely why Claire and I chose to do our own little bit of SEA research for the book on the topic of freedom. And we spoke with some people whose words are in the book to illustrate what they discovered when they were in that process of talking about the role of freedom in their lives. And in so many ways, that shows you how SEA is about freedom, and it is also about coming to be more specific about concepts like freedom that can be so wide and so non-specific that people don't know really anymore what they are talking about. So it is a way of sharpening your wits and becoming more careful in your thinking, in what Heidegger would call your deep thinking about the issues, instead of your calculative thinking about the issues, teaching you to be always attentive to what is going on for a person, instead of thinking you already know what the topic is, or you already know what that person thinks about it. It is about a discipline of relating, and a discipline of being, and a discipline of attention, and a discipline of understanding, and lots more like that. And we hope it will be helpful to lots of researchers, and as we have been exploring today, to a lot of other people as well, who want to research their own lives in their own right without doing a research project for their doctorate or their master's dissertation.
Absolutely. Well, and as we come into the last few minutes, I want to make sure that we get the discount code back into the chat. So while we're here, while we're all together around this subject, it's a great time to buy the book. Unless you're an NSP student, wait for the books to be bought by the organization, as you were saying, Claire. But you can get onto the Routledge site, use that discount code that's in the chat. If you're watching the recording here in the library, in the online events library rather, we'll have the code there, and I'll put it into the YouTube chat as well. So great. And I think the other big thing that's so helpful for books is to leave a review on Amazon.
Oh,
as
yes.
well.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. And lots of stars.
Yes. Get as many stars in there as you can. So even if you prefer to buy the book on Routledge and get the discount, if you can go over to Amazon, it'll make a big difference in colleagues and friends finding the book in years to come as well. So please think about doing that too. With just a minute or two to go, Claire and Emmy, I wonder if there's any kind of
Yes, I
parting
want to
thoughts?
say something, because people might not realize this, but Claire and I have worked together for over 30 years, and we know each other really rather well. And we have really been working out some of these things together throughout that period, really. And the first book we did together was in, what was it, Claire? Was it 2005?
2005, yeah. Existential Perspectives on Human Issues.
So that was a book we did where we used the 4 dimensions of existence to look very closely at various important experiences and concepts that happen at the physical level, at the social level, at the personal level, and at the spiritual level. And I think that was the first time we sort of structured something quite as clearly in that way. And we've done many things like that since. Maybe one of the most memorable ones was us doing you doing supervising my clinical work with a client for the Wiley World Handbook of Psychotherapy, where we also used SEA a little bit, not as fully as that, but that was also very significant, wasn't it?
And
So-
also distinctive features as well. We used quite a bit of the 4 dimensions in our little book on distinctive features.
Distinctive features, yes,
yeah.
we did. Yeah. Well, so
And
that's
that-
a very small introductory book, which is also with Routledge, incidentally.
Yeah, and it had the dialectic of time that we've developed as well. So there's that kind of, again, that's a theme that's brought into this book.
Yeah. So that development is there in our work together over the years. I just wanted to note that. It's not just something we plucked out of thin air. It is something that is tested and tried, and that has been thought about, turned over and around, and that is now pretty flourishing as something we have confidence in. And we hope that people will find it helpful and useful in their work.
Well, an important acknowledgement of kind of a long fermentation of the work and of a very rich collegial relationship between you both as well. So, and I want to say a personal thank you to you on behalf of Online Events for trusting us with the book launch today. We're so honored to have you both here and to be doing the book launch together. I want to say thank you to Jeff for taking care of all our technology here.
Thank you.
Special thank you to your subscribers and YouTube, Emmy, that have come along and been part of the launch too, and everybody who's been with us live on Zoom and watching the recording too.
So I'd like to give a final toast to the book, because a book launch is like a birth, and this book has now a life of its own, and it will find its way in the world. And I wish it good luck. Be well. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for coming
Thank you,
to the launch
everyone.
event.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
my friends on YouTube.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
And let's open the microphones to hear some noises as we leave together. Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
It's very interesting.